This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. Filthy Hope was conceived and dreamt on Gadigal and Birrabirragal country. We acknowledge these peoples as the traditional owners of these lands and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We at Filthy Hope pay homage to the ancient and ongoing traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast. Hello and welcome back to Filthy Hope, a podcast from Uniting Heart and Soul in Wallara, where we dive into the grey spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. I'm your host, Jonty Cornford, Creative Director at Uniting Heart and Soul, and with me of course is the Reverend Vanessa Williams-Henke, Senior Pastor at Uniting Heart and Soul. This week on the show, we're joined by Rachel Humphries. Rachel is on staff with us here at Uniting Heart and Soul on the worship team, and is a voice that you'll hear a lot more of on Uniting Heart and Soul Records later this year. Like most episodes of this show, there is a swearing warning, but we also have some pretty frank discussions about sexual assault, mental illness, and suicide. So if you find this conversation triggering in any way, please don't hesitate to contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or use any of the mental health resources down below in the show notes. If you like this show and you want to support us, please leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. These reviews really are a huge help for us. And if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, like the video and hit subscribe. If you haven't checked us out on YouTube yet, we post videos of every episode every week, as well as shorter bite-sized clips. Please enjoy episode 41 of Filthy Hope. Welcome to the show. How are we?
Yay, we got Rachel.
Yes, we have a fantastic special guest with us this week. Rachel Humphries, welcome to the show.
Ooh, clap track.
Yeah, we'll put the clap track in.
Yeah, now.
Yes, we are so lucky to have Rachel here today. I'm very excited to hear. We're going to be hearing some of your story.
Yeah.
Maybe some testimony. We'll see what happens. So just to introduce yourself to our audience, who are you, Rachel Humphries?
So I am 22, born in 2000. I'm currently studying music at the Australian Institute of Music, and I work with the music at Wallara, Uniting Heart and Soul, Double Bay, the longest title of any church that I know.
Good group of people, I've heard.
Oh, yeah, some weird ones, but you know. Yeah, that's the main things. I use she, they pronouns, and I identify as a queer person.
And you're going to help me with that today, aren't you?
Yeah, we'll give you the rundown.
Yeah, I've got so many questions and a bit of an alert. You could maybe put this up in big thingo on the thingo. Alert. I just don't want to offend any of that.
Don't worry, you're
okay,
just a
so I'm
trainee.
going to ask the questions. Help me, Rachel, help me.
Will do.
Okay.
And some context as well. We, on the day that we're recording this, is the week after Mardi Gras, the parades.
Yeah.
World Pride, it's Australia. Let's go.
Yeah, and it was my first parade that I went to. It was so much fun. Had a great time. Did you go to the parade this year or no?
I did not. I had work the next morning.
Well, so did I.
I watched it on telly.
I watched it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was so proud of the Leichhardt Uniting Church crew.
Yeah,
and
that was sick.
Their drummers.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. Radhika Sukumar White, the minister there.
And Adrian.
And Adrian led that. It was wonderful to see our brothers and sisters.
Yeah, it was very cool.
And Wayside.
Yeah, Wayside had their float as well.
It's really good to see vocal support because I think that's a thing that I've encountered a lot of churches, especially these days. There's a lot of there's not as much like against it, but you get a lot of quietness. It's just like, you know, it's not talked about. It's not bad, but it's not like a good thing. So to have people like in part of the parade just is really good to see. Someone who works in the church as well.
Did you see the bit of media on Pitt Street Uniting and the tool that vandalised the Rainbow Steps?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think Roseville Uniting's LED signage out the front got vandalised as well.
Oh, wow.
For similar reasons. Yeah.
So
We love that. Yeah, great.
Sad, isn't it?
It is. It's really sad, especially in these days. Because,
Absolutely.
So that's some context. Talking about pride, queerness today in the wake of that as well. But whatever else comes up in your story, we're looking forward to hearing that as well. Before we do that, of course, we've got to do Vent Central.
Play the music, Jonty. So, I was at a thing, a training thing, and it was extraordinary. And I'm in this really phenomenal group of ministers, and it's about mentoring and helping ministers on their journey, etc. And one of the sessions that we were talking about was spiritual friendships and the importance of having deep spiritual friendships when you're in, particularly when you're in leadership as well. But I think just generally,
Just in
as
the
Christians
church,
in the church, we need deep spiritual friendships. Anyway, one of the presenters, who I absolutely love, who I consider a really good friend of mine, is talking about he has 7 spiritual friends. And I said, in the middle of the group, am I one of those spiritual friends? And he said, no. It was like, shot through the heart and you're to blame, honey. You give love
a bad name.
bad name. It was bad. It was really bad. And I was so offended that I launched into what I do when I get offended. And so I got a little bit, I think, obnoxiously aggressive, as a colleague of mine described me as being. Who would have thought? And I said, why on earth can't I be a spiritual friend? And he launched into about being a man and being a married man and having a wife and the importance of his relationship with his wife and how he just cannot deviate from that, and having spiritual friends should be same sex. So that's a good question for you, Rachel. I want to ask you about how that works for you. Spiritual friends. So Vanessa, you need to be spiritual friends with women and not with men. And I say, but I don't want to fuck you. And all the other men in the room just kind of, if they could have gone and fallen back on the chairs, they would have. And so I said, and I don't want to fuck any of you anyway. Actually, I don't want to fuck anybody. I just want to be your spiritual friend. And they didn't know what to do with that. And it kind of landed not with a laugh, not with an anything, with a bit of like a lead balloon. It just like hit the ground and nobody really knew what to do. And then this beautiful young minister, really young minister that I could be like a mum to, must have felt so bad for me because I feel like he was a huge empath and picked up on my sorrow. Yeah. And he turned to me and he said, Ness, I'll be your spiritual friend. Oh, bless him. And I said, don't worry, I'm letting you off the hook. It's okay, brother. You don't have to feel sorry for me. It's okay. So then I get in the car and I'm still feeling a bit, they don't want to be my spiritual friend. I've got a vagina. Nobody wants to be my spiritual friend. So then I text your dad, the Reverend John Humphries, and I say, brother, am I your spiritual friend? And he came back with and said, hell yeah.
I love it's the zero
Something
context
like
as well. It's just like, am I your friend?
No, spiritual friend. He said, hell yeah, absolutely. And I said, back at you. I went, phew, it's all okay. Play the music.
That gives me the shits now.
Why does it
Because
give you the shits?
it just, and I know a handful of these people that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I just think like this whole thing that is in some, I guess it's born out of particular types of theology.
Yeah.
Of having these clear lines of spiritual authority that gender plays a huge part in. I just go, why?
It's such a generational thing as
Yeah,
well. I think.
yeah,
Also,
yeah.
as well as, yeah.
Do you think?
It is. Well, but it is, but also I have people who I still consider friends, less close than we used to be, that have bought into that style of theology and still have those very clear lines of, well, there's Christ, and then there's the church, and then there's the man, and then there's the wife, and then there's the children. And that's the
line.
That's the hierarchy of spiritual authority. And I'm like, and I mean, like the fact that the Uniting Church has a flat, non-hierarchical structure as well, I think speaks to a lot of why I feel more at home in something like the Uniting Church, because that hierarchical thing just isn't even a thing that we consider. So I'm like, I have so many people in my life who identify as female who are incredibly important to me and incredibly close with me in lots of ways, but in that spiritual element as well. That I can't really imagine doing life not with.
Yeah.
It
those
reminds
people?
me of back to my childhood. I went to like a few different like youth groups, or that's a total thing on Friday nights in churches, and like they used to separate us.
Yeah.
Boys and girls.
Boys and girls, and like you weren't even allowed to like talk to them, especially during God time. It was like so divided, and I found that like so weird, because these were different like denominations that I went to, because I tried a few. And I was just so confused, because I was raised in Uniting Church. I was like, what do you mean I can't hang out with the boys? They're having so much more fun. And I used to hang out with guys anyway, especially they were just always my friends. And so I was like, why can't I be with my friends? Why do I have to be with the girls? That's so weird. That's why is that still around in the adulthood?
There's a church in my local area that I know for their youth/young adult, like young people service. Either side of the aisle is boys and girls.
That's still a thing? Because that's the church I'm talking about. That's when it was like really, if we're thinking of the same one. That's
We'll talk off mic
later.
if it's the same one. But yeah, that's a thing. And a friend of mine went and was like, oh, that's weird. I wonder if that's just like not intentionally, but they've just kind of naturally. So went and sat on the other side, and an elder came up and asked them to move to the other side of the church.
Tell me, is it Baptist?
I won't say.
We can't say.
I won't say.
You're no fun, Jonty.
But I'll tell you off mic. But yeah, I just think, and I'm not necessarily throwing shade at these people.
No.
Because I think they've bought into something that they value deeply, but has kind of.
What is it that they
changed.
value deeply?
I'm not going to try and speak for them, but I think the things that they value are external to the structural things that are then embedded in those church structures that they are then a part of.
They learn it by default.
We talked about misogyny a couple of weeks ago in Event Central.
Yeah, we did.
There's misogyny rooted deep into a lot of older strands of theology that run. Read the Bible. Like not that the Bible.
Get a copy?
I'll send you a copy. It's not that the Bible is misogynist. It's that the Bible was written through a whole bunch of different eras of history in which the culture was misogynist, and so that it's not. I mean, it should be surprising, but unfortunately, it's not that some of that is still lingering in different pockets today.
Just breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's fucked.
Breaks my
So
heart.
sad.
What's your language, Jonty?
Yeah, gosh. Shouldn't fucking swear, Jonty.
Sorry.
God damn it.
Sorry, Mum.
It's above.
Cool. Well, let's package that, and maybe we can unpack that another time further, because there's lots to talk about there.
Oh, yeah.
I'd actually love if people are listening and they feel like something's been lit under them, send us a message. We'd love to hear.
Or if I've crossed
stories.
a line and offended anyone, I want to know about that as well.
Yeah.
I like to know. I like to know where it lands.
We'd love to hear stories about that, because I think in my experience, a lot of what helps to make things less painful is when people get to share their stories.
Yeah, I do too.
I also encourage people to challenge it. If you're like
Oh,
sitting there
yes.
and something's about that sounds weird and you're like,
Yeah.
is that a thing that I see that. I hadn't thought of that as weird. Think about that as weird. I'm all for the challenge and,
Yeah,
you know,
same.
ask the questions. And if you want, go sit on the other side of the aisle, see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go over to you now, Rach. And I want to kind of hand over to you. We can, maybe Pride would be a good place to start because that's kind of, we're in the middle of, that's in the popular conscience at the moment.
Yes.
I guess a little question to start, and then you can sort of weave this into your story, however much or little you want to share with us today. What does Pride mean for you?
For me, Pride is really just about like feeling comfortable in who you are and finding yourself and then being okay with that, which is like total a thing that especially young people these days, they're questioning. It's very similar to faith in that sort of thing of you're trying to figure out what fits. You try on different outfits, you know, everyone goes through an emo phase or something. It's finding something and then finding people who then are comfortable with the way that you express and feel about yourself.
Yep.
So that's, for me, that's what Pride is. It's identity, it's sexuality, it's gender, it's whatever, finding labels or not labels that make you feel like you're being authentic in how you're living and not just going through the motions of what everyone else expects.
Ness, I know you've listened to and have some connection with another podcast, the Spiritual Misfits podcast. They just released a panel episode that's probably a few weeks old by the time this comes out. Sorry, Somerset, I'm dating the episode. They at the time recording, they just released a panel with 4 queer people talking about Pride.
Yeah.
And one of the guests was talking about the word pride not as a, like we often the word pride in the Bible is associated negatively.
Yeah.
It's like the pride comes before the fall, like that kind of way of expressing hubris or boasting, like pridefulness. When one of the guests on this panel was making the distinction that when we talk about pride with queerness, it's actually pride as in the opposite of shame, and being proud while still being humble, as opposed to being a proud asshole, which like we can all.
I was about to say, that leads me to a conversation I had this weekend with someone who is of an older generation, standing there listening to their opinion of Mardi Gras. Let me tell you, an entertaining situation to be stuck in the middle of, because I don't think it's a conversation I've had with at least these people. Most people can assume, looking at me, that I am a member of the Alphabet Mafia. Some people don't, so that's entertaining. But the opinion was that Mardi Gras was debaucherous, a mockery of the church, and that they need to change to make other people comfortable. And I'm sitting there going, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Like,
That makes me so mad.
it was honestly like I had to walk away because that's so not what pride is. It's about like acceptance, or at least that's what I view it and what most people view it as. And it's like the opposite of that. It's that doesn't matter, and we don't care how you feel, and like not in that sort of way, but like the people who are a part of that community don't judge. There's no judgment. And that's all they're asking for. You know, just a level of comfort and safety, which is often something that people, especially part of the community, lack.
Yeah. Mate, I don't know how you resonate with this, but I think people can fall into the trap of grouping every small community in that larger movement of queerness into just the one movement, when
Just
in
gay.
fact yeah but like whereas gay communities and trans communities and lesbian communities and bisexual communities and everything in what did you say, the
Alphabet Mafia.
they're all unique
Different things.
movements in their own,
Yeah.
like on their own, and lumping them all into one movement and then sort of deriding them and saying, oh, they as a movement need to make everyone else feel more comfortable. I'm like, dude,
It's like,
what?
It's not their job to make you feel comfortable. It's
Especially
your
when
job.
you have been pushed into spaces where you are not comfortable for your entire life because of who you are.
Yeah.
To then be told that you need to make other people feel comfortable.
That's it. I think it's almost a little sad that we have to have things like Pride
Yes.
and Mardi Gras and stuff like that, because if it wasn't for attitudes like that, it wouldn't exist. Everyone else would just be like, oh, this is a normal thing, which it is a normal thing.
And we had our
Very normal.
Prime Minister in the
First one.
parade. He was saying, I saw an interview, it was like his 30-somethingth parade that he'd been to. So it was just normal for him. But the fact that he was the first Prime Minister
To do it.
it's sad that that's really important, that's a big moment, but it is a big moment.
It is. But it's
This
also
country is moving towards being overall a more accepting and a more safe country for people of different communities.
The safety thing, I think, is really interesting because that hadn't deeply resonated with me because I'm a hetero white chick in her 50s.
Just for clarifications, she, her, he, him,
Yeah.
pronouns.
Oh.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Did I do that
Yeah,
by
yeah, yeah.
nature? Oh, look at me. That was by total accident.
Just helping people out there
thank
for
you so much. Thank you so much. But I was chatting with somebody very dear to me whose son was going to Mardi Gras and had flown over from Europe especially for it. And his son is in his 30s and I saw a photo of what he was wearing and he was wearing this tight little gold cock sock glitter thing and this little bralette gold blingarama thing.
Pop
Just,
off.
totally phenomenal rack.
Yeah.
Bod was on fire. And his dad said, have a great night, babe. Be safe, look after yourself. I'll leave the door unlocked kind of conversation. And he left. But his dad heard there was a ruckus down the street and there was a group of young people out there. And the friend's son was walking to the station to catch a train into the city from North Sydney area. And so the dad got very concerned about his 35-year-old son's safety and rushed straight out to see if he was going to be safe to get through the young people. And I think, oh, shit, that wouldn't even occurred to me.
Oh, it's
you know
such
what I
a
mean?
thing. But it's a similar thing for like just even being a young, moderately attractive woman going to see. I don't feel comfortable, particularly clubbing in the city these days. In most areas, the only place that I feel comfortable, especially wearing outfits that, sometimes you want to dress up, you want to look nice. I wear outfits that like, I'm not saying that like I dress scantily clad.
You costume, girlfriend.
I costume
You
all the
costume,
time.
theatrically costume.
But like the last time I went to a straight club, I got assaulted. And I've been catcalled, I've been stalked, I've been...
What's catcalled mean?
You only get honked at or yelled at from
Whistled
outside
at.
a window.
Woohoo?
Whistled at, like things like that. As
Is
like
it bad
a young
that I'd
person.
want to be woohooed? Is that bad? It is,
Some
isn't it?
people like it, but that ties into like my identity as a
Yeah.
person because I identify as queer, genderqueer, and then queer in other aspects as well as on the ace spectrum. So I don't see myself as a just, sexy person. So like any of that just makes me super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's like I just want to dress nice and look pretty
Yeah.
and things like that. But like that's such a thing of the safest place for not even queer people but women often is Newtown. I know so many like straight women who'll go to lesbian clubs to feel safe.
Wow. And chicks want to dance. That's the thing.
We just want to dance.
That's right.
You don't want the person creepily coming up and
Touching
grabbing
your
you.
ass,
Or,
yeah.
you don't want any of that. Sometimes you just want to dance to good music.
And I think I want the woohoo because nobody's woohooed me in about 40 years.
I got woohooed at 7 a.m. very recently. And I was like, I'm in my work attire at a cafe.
Yeah.
Like, what is...
How does it make you feel? Is it inappropriate that I ask you that?
So uncomfortable. It's not
Really?
inappropriate, but it makes me so uncomfortable.
Could I ask why?
Well, again, I don't see myself that way. And like, I don't know, I just never really saw myself as, I guess, super attractive. I don't think I'm unattractive, but I just never really cared. I don't really care about my body image. I don't work out. I don't eat well. I had a pretty big glow up from high school. I was a nerdy little chaplain's kid with braces up until like I graduated.
Tell us about that, Rach.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't really find, leaning back to identity, I did a lot of discovery afterwards, and a lot of that came from trauma.
Yeah.
So music is a very big part of who I am. I had the joy to experience some psychological abuse in high school that led to depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. So I lost a big part of my identity, which is, not something you want to lose, especially at that age. So I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, who I was, and then I no longer had music, which was always like my safety net, to support me.
Yeah.
So that led to alcoholism, a lot of drinking, a lot of bad choices, and a trip to, my university sent me to the psych ward. My first try at university, and I worked full time. But yeah, so I was always like that sort of person, and I've always just seen myself as that. As a kid, I played like this primary school. I used to hang out with the guys more than the girls because I thought the girls were really annoying. They always wanted to play baby dolls and things like that, and I didn't get that. What was it, year 2, kindergarten? They wanted to play horsies. I hated playing horsies.
No saddle club? Hello world.
I hated Saddle Club. I got Star Wars instead.
Star Wars?
Yeah, I had Star Wars and Harry Potter. And then looking back at it, I go, oh no, I was the weird kid. It's not that they were weird. I was weird. When you spend your lunchtime reading Harry Potter in the library with another girl, you're like, oh, weird. Yeah. And then you start questioning. Then we had lockdown. Lockdown is a big period for a lot of people. We were all stuck inside with our own thoughts and our families.
Preach.
That leaves a lot of time to self-reflect, doesn't it? Thinking back to, I watch a lot of TV. Jonty can also attest to this. Lot of TV and movies.
Books.
And books. I ran out of things to watch on Netflix. It was that bad. But then thinking back to my childhood favorite movies is when I when you get the first inklings. This is a similar thing for a lot of queer people that I've discussed with. You look back on the characters you really liked in the movies that you really liked and went, that was a sign that I probably should have realized. So Jonty, you've told me before, what was your favorite the first time?
Oh, yeah. We were talking about this before. I remember it was a 5th birthday party. We went to the movies to watch Percy Jackson.
Great movie.
The Lightning Thief. And me and about 2 or 3 other guys, we were about 10 or 11 at that point, just suddenly were absolutely smitten with Alexandra Daddario, who's an actress who, I can still remember because it was that first thing as a young boy growing up where you suddenly realised that you were attracted to another person. And we had this conversation. I was like, dude, she's so hot. And that whole guy thing that we went through at that time in my life. And in retrospect, that was... I can identify that as an early signifier of my sexuality and my sexual preference as I was starting to go through puberty, becoming a parent. And I didn't recognize that at the time, but lo and behold, I'm still into chicks. That's just always been my thing. And so
for me, it was looking back at the characters that I really liked. I was obsessed with the Bring It On movies. For those who don't know, it's about cheerleaders, and it's the exact same plot line remade 4 or 5 different times, but it's the first one that I was really in love with, and there was a character called Missy. She was a gymnast who rocks up. She had dyed hair, and she had more of an edgy vibe. And it's one of those things where it's do I want to be that person or do I want to kiss that person?
Oh, wow.
And that's what it was. And it's a bit of both. Bit of both it is.
Oh, wow. See, I was into Barbara Eden, I Dream of Jeannie.
Which was, I also loved
I wanted that
too much.
blonde ponytail.
It's great.
And I loved her. I think I wanted to be her.
That's about to say,
but I didn't want to kiss her.
The questioning comes in with as a woman or
I wanted that outfit.
AFAB.
Yeah.
AFAB is assigned female at birth. Ooh. So that's for a term that's often used, especially in like, different like gender bending spaces. Yeah. So I'm AFAB and stuff like that. It's a lot of looking back on those characters and it's like, oh, did I really want to be that person? Or maybe it was I'm attracted to that person.
But there's a distinction there because I think about that Percy Jackson example versus we've talked about The Last of Us on this podcast before. The game that's based on, I think Ellie, who in that first game in the game I think she's like 15. I want to be like Ellie. Yeah. And that's not a romantic attraction thing. That's I identify parts of her character that I attach to and admire and want to be more like. And so who was the character you were talking about?
Oh,
I Dream of Jeannie.
I Dream of Jeannie, but and Endora from Bewitched, the bitchy mother, I loved her too.
And so I'm assuming that's probably not an attractive thing. That's more of a aspirational thing.
Character.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you wanted to be a strong female.
Female, yeah.
Another irony if
with
you
magic
want to
powers.
Who doesn't want magic powers? I believe that fantasy is personally my favorite genre because if I wanted to be sad and miserable and watch something about the real world, I'd go into the real world. It's sad enough. Irony being a lot of people who are part of the queer community relate to the villains.
Interesting.
The outcasts or the overlooked or things like that because that's who, they're less likely to relate to the, what's it called? The heroes who are the perfect and stuff. They're like the flawed character. Because that's who you see.
Always love the flawed character. They're so vulnerable.
Exactly.
The flawed character. Yeah.
They often are more complex as well.
Always. Yeah.
I love, this is no shock to anyone that listens to this show, I love horror and science fiction and fantasy.
Really?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, shocking.
Guillermo del Toro, do you know who Guillermo del Toro is? Do you know who?
No.
Guillermo del Toro is a director. He won Best Picture a number of years back for The Shape of Water. He has made a whole bunch of really, really fantastic movies that are in the kind of horror, fantasy, science fiction.
He wasn't.
Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, he was.
Pan's Labyrinth. And so he talks about, from a very young age, identifying with monsters. And he loves fantasy and horror and science fiction because of monsters. Wow. And he remembers very vividly watching Creature from the Black Lagoon as a kid. And there's a moment in that movie where it's from the 50s. It's one of those, it's one of the very last Universal monster movies that came out in that long line of movies, where the creature, there's that image of the creature carrying the woman, the blonde bombshell, and it's presented as this horrible, scary thing. And he always identified with the monster because all the monster wants to do is connect with someone. Oh. And he's being portrayed as the monster. Yeah. And so he views monsters and creatures and horror as inherently about the other and identifying with the other. So when you watch his movies like The Shape of Water is essentially a Creature from the Black Lagoon, but the creature gets the girl.
Oh, see, I want to watch that now.
Oh, it's a fantastic film. You probably
is
love
as long as there's no axe through anyone's head with blood.
There's some good creature stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to that movie.
Yeah, it's great. But that's exactly, I think, I don't know if you, she does fuck a fish. What you're talking about identifying with villains, I think that is a really powerful thing. And I think I'm a straight white guy, but I identify with that as well in the sense that I love the idea of portraying villains or monsters or anyone that is an other as someone just as deserving of love and affection and connection and community and all of those.
I find a lot of people find like their identity or just questions or things like that from media, which is why it's good to have good media out there.
And representation.
And things like that, and which is why I loved the recent thing of creating stories of the backstories behind villains, giving the villains more depth than just bad character, I'm evil, therefore that's why I do this, which you don't get a lot of these days. A lot of the more like obscure and, relatable, which is hilarious as well, because everyone's just like, this is the main character. I think a really good representation of that is Encanto. Encanto is one of my favorite.
I love Encanto. Yeah.
Disney movies that's come out. I think it's right up there with Mulan, which I'll get into later for a different reason.
Let's get down to business.
We'll get into that one. But Encanto, first of all, is about family trauma and generational trauma, which is things. But Disney created a lot of dolls for this one character, the oldest sister, who is the pretty one with the flower powers and stuff like that. They're like, she's really pretty. She's going to be the best selling one. Lo and behold, the movie comes out and the favorite character is actually Louisa, who is the sister who carries all the burdens and is like the strong one, who's not conventionally attractive, but like has the most relatable character. And they're like, what do? We've made all this merch for this other character, not expecting.
And the kids love
this
the
one.
little one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
so interesting.
So like the characters that they didn't realize. And that's like this character who they related to. And we're all adults now. We have adult money to spend it on whatever we like.
But also like the character of Bruno.
Exactly. That's the other favorite character.
That's otherness encapsulated in a character. Like getting like a character being outcast because they are an other. And then the whole movie is about empathizing with and understanding the other. Like exactly. I just think it's it's wonderful.
Movie.
Yeah.
If we go back to my obsession with Disney, which Ness can attest to, I'm not quite on Ness's level, but I'm pretty high. The questioning of gender came through with, again, looking back on it and going, there was a sign there, because Mulan was my favorite character.
We all love Mulan.
For those who aren't aware, which I don't know, have you been living under a rock? Mulan is a woman who dresses up as a man to go and fight in the war in her dad's place. She's a woman who dresses up as a man.
Yes.
To go and fight a war, and then doesn't really care about how she's perceived for the rest of the movie, and has a lot more of a toughness to her. I loved that. And then looking back on it, it's because I don't necessarily see myself as a female, which, is an interesting context concept for people who aren't familiar with that. But yeah, no, because I love that, because she dresses as a man, she dresses as a woman, she looks great as both. That's what I relate with.
Interesting, Rachel. That is so interesting. And she's such a powerhouse of a
Exactly.
character.
She's so cool.
Yeah, she's really cool. She's cool in either outfit.
Yeah, as I say, I'm now my dog's name Mulan. So.
Yeah, I know. Bloody Lani.
She's great. She thinks she's scarier than she is. I think I also relate to that one. But yeah, so it's like really interesting how media plays into like your questioning and your identity, and like looking into it, and who you relate to can tell you a lot about yourself.
Can I ask and maybe prompt another little branch in this story? You touched on, you went through some pretty rough patches. Where, if at all, or maybe you can talk about where this wasn't the case, could even be just as interesting. Did the church or faith communities or that whole element of our lives, where did that interact with that journey of going through some tough things and figuring out things about yourself and coming out of that? And
yeah, so I was raised in the church. As Ness mentioned, my dad is Rev Humphries.
Who we're going to have on the podcast shortly as well.
Yeah.
Chaplain at Ravenswood.
Everyone knew him as like the Rev and stuff. So I was just raised in the church. Mum is quite religious, grandparents religious. I grew up going to church every Sunday and events and all those things. Yeah, I used to sing in the church. In fact, my first experience with music really as a kid and like figuring out that I was good at it was at a rehearsal for my parents who used to play in the band. I was tiny. I think I was, my parents say that I was like barely like walking or talking or something like that. And I sat behind a drum set, which is a hilarious thing to picture because I'm a very small person now, tiny person sitting behind a drum set. I started playing along and I said, "This beat, mummy, this beat."
Oh, wow.
And my mum just looks at me like I've got 3 heads and goes, yes, that is. Like, well, how the hell is this child doing that? So like, that's like, it's literally been like some of my strongest memories of a kid were eating pizza while my parents rehearsed for band, for church. So I didn't really like think about faith. You know, it's just something that was, you went to youth group on Fridays and you went to church on Sundays. That's what it was.
Tick.
Tick.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
I'm Christian because that's how I was raised. So I didn't really have a strong faith, and I always had a very progressive upbringing. My dad's a menace. He likes to call himself a bad Christian as a reverend. And so how I viewed faith was very, like, you know, fluid in itself. But I didn't really have to think on it until I ended up in the psych ward. I call it my grippy sock vacation, which is a great one because, you know, they take away your shoes and your shoelaces so you can't hang yourself. Of course, I didn't find a lot of God or faith in that because, you know, the only other option is I've been through all of this crap and I'm, you know, an alcoholic and suicidal and all those things. And if God does exist, he's kind of an asshole. I don't know about you, but like, you know, when you're in that moment, that's what you think because, you know, the other options are he doesn't exist and this just sucks, or why would you do this to me? This just sucks. So neither one's a great one to look at. And at that point, looking back on it now, I still think God is a bit of an asshole because he has a cruel sense of humor. I mentioned before that I grew up singing in a church. I always jokingly said that I will never be a worship leader. You can't make me be a worship leader. And if you make me a worship leader, I used to joke that I'd sing happily, but if you make me a worship leader, we're singing Oceans 6 times and that's it. And like Oceans is so overdone, and if people who have heard the original recordings, it's got like 15 repeats of the bridge. Like no one wants that. Yeah, it's like a 12-minute song. So that's what I said. I was like, you make me do this, this is what's happening. Lo and behold, here I am. Woo-hoo. Yeah, whose fault's that now? I also said I'd never end up like my dad. That's awful.
Bum, bum.
Here I am working in a church and just, I like to say I'm a prettier version. Because, you know, I speak out and I talk about faith a lot and I'm still super nerdy. I don't quite have the same graphic tee collection as he has though.
It's pretty impressive.
So like a lot of my things have gone like kicking and screaming and never put a challenge to God, because as soon as I came out of the psych ward, a few months later, Ness, who I actually knew in high school, she spoke about like her story and stuff, and she was training under my dad when I was still in high school. She worked at Raver, contacts me going, "Hey, I've just been assigned to a church. Can I pay you to do music?" This is me who's left the church completely. Like, I don't have a community really. And I was like, well, I guess, you know, I still love music, so I guess I'll give it a shot.
Money's good.
Money is good. Like, this is like also like post-COVID. I'd lost my full-time job as a receptionist because of COVID. So I was like, I have nothing else at this point. Why not? And here I am.
You wonder where God is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. A lot of it comes like kicking and screaming and a little bit of an aftermath. But, you know, you get there. And like, I'm still figuring out my faith. And I think that's an important thing to know. Question everything. Question your gender. Question your sexuality. Question your faith.
And you do. You're amazing on Sundays. I can be mid-sermon, mid-flying right through my words, and out will come Rachel.
With a sarcastic comment and a smile.
No, not sarcastic. It's usually a really important thing that you're it is a really important thing you're about to say, and you're often asking the question that's probably on the lips of everybody in the room. And you make
I remember
address
the
it.
first
It's really
few
powerful.
weeks. I was really annoyed with you the first few weeks
Shit, I'm
because no. What happened was because of course I was still in this really bad mental state. And I'm working at church, and you chose like that to talk about a lot of mental health and trauma in like the first few weeks of working there, and then you made me like cry in every sermon. And let me tell you, it is very difficult to then go up and try and sing a song after you've been like crying.
With the snot nose.
Yeah, like sobbing. And Ness is like, and then now the worship team's going to come up and sing. And I'm like,
We did go deep quickly, didn't we?
You did. You were like really went into it on like the first few weeks. And then I'm there going like wiping my eyes and like shoving tissues up my nose and went, FaceTime, let's go.
What did that do for you?
It was confronting, I guess. Again, a lot of questioning. And I guess now where I stand is you talk about your interpretation and Ness's version of the Bible. Rachel's version of the Bible in a short summary is God says don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I've figured out. That's the only certain part of my faith. Be a nice person and be kind to others and love them, even when they're annoying as crap.
Do you get how loved you are by God? Do you get how precious you are?
I think I'm still working that one out. Then again, like first you got to like love yourself first. I'm still in the figuring out. Again, I use the terms like queer and, you know, I still don't necessarily define my faith. People ask me like if I'm Christian, I'm like, I believe God is real and I believe he says be nice. It's like that is like my faith, and like you can interpret that however you want. I do the same with my gender and sexuality. I'm like, I am queer and on the A spectrum, and there's your information, go. Don't ask any more questions. I don't have any
I'm still working
answers.
it out.
Yeah. I don't like answers.
I think I want to call you on that. I think you do. Like, I think that's bullshit, Rach. I think
I like
bullshit.
questions.
You like answers. You like working it out. You're a deep thinker.
I like working it out, but I
Yeah.
don't like
You don't want to be told.
certainties. So as a kid, this is another thing from my childhood, I used to ask a lot of questions. And it used to annoy the crap out of my parents because, like, not like light questions, like, what are we having for dinner? Are we there yet? Things like that. No. How do trees work? How does gravity work? How is electricity passed from one thing to the other? And my parents used to be like, I don't know, Google it. To the point where they like bought me a book to write down all of my questions and Google later. That was my parents' solution. It's like I've always been ask questions, find out, learn weird things. I love fun facts.
I mean, look at like how often in scripture Jesus answers questions with another question.
I was about to say, doesn't he only answer directly like 3 questions?
He
and
barely
the rest
ever
of
does
them,
it.
Yeah. The rest of them, like out of the hundreds of questions he's asked in the Bible, I think he answers like 3.
Because
That's my favorite fact.
the way I and this is something I every time I go back over whichever gospel I'm going over at the time, I'm always struck by how unwilling Jesus is to hold the hands of the religious people in the culture that he's a part of. And because they come across to different degrees in different gospels as the most sure, the most certain, the most
People,
aloof, the most judgmental people, because they're taking part in ancient Jewish tradition. And Jesus is just constantly answering questions that are almost always delivered like as trick questions designed to sort of trip him up with another question. Not in the dismissive, you suck, so I'm not going to answer your question kind of way, but in the, your question isn't actually a good question. Here's a better question to consider.
I like to
not giving you the answer. Wrestle with this.
I like to view it as he just emptied a bag of Lego on like a table and went, figure it out. They're like, do you have instructions? He was like, nope, here's a picture on the box.
Yeah.
Build it. It's like, where does this piece go? I don't know. Lego is infuriating, by the way.
I'm going to say something really radical.
Go. Love it.
God's got something really massive for you, Rachel Humphries. I've known it for a while. Something really massive. And I would urge you to be listening for that booming voice of where God is taking you, because I just have this huge sense it's going to rock the world, sister, because you've got so much to offer. You're such a smart, hotly wired, magnificent child of God. And the church would be so blessed to have you as a person fully plugged into it and leading the way. And I can just see that there's a role for you. And I'm just so glad that we found you first.
But also,
You too, brother.
I'm going to yes and that.
Improv.
We talked, yeah, we talked a few weeks ago about this with Somerset. It's super easy for churches to claim people as their own and want to use their resources to develop their church. And I know this isn't what you're saying.
I'm not saying Uniting Heart and Soul.
No.
I'm talking the church in the big C.
Yeah, exactly. And
God's church.
it doesn't matter where you go. Like the Rachel Humphries brand, let's call it, is worthwhile
Yeah.
wherever you go.
Beautiful.
It's not a Uniting Heart and Soul thing.
No, that's
And,
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Self-deprecation and musical theatre. It's my brand. And
Do
black.
you love being complimented as much as I do?
I hate it. Oh my gosh. My first immediate response was that I had like 3 sarcastic comments. The first one was,
I could see you panicking.
oh yeah, I was like, the first one was, well, could you give me some directions? Because I'm really directionally
Yeah.
challenged. So how the hell do I get there? Yeah, there was just a bunch of them in my head. It was like, oh, yeah, no. Well, my friends used to nickname me Dory and the goddess of serotonin deficiency. To those who don't know, serotonin deficiency leads to
Depression.
depression. So if you have depression, you have a lack of serotonin. So I'm like, I don't take compliments well. It's like, can I interest you in a sarcastic comment instead?
Have you met my friend Jonty?
Yeah. There's a reason we get on. Yeah. Like, you suck. No, you suck.
Yeah, pretty much.
Did you warm up today for singing? Nah, I had a coffee.
Does it sound like I warmed up today?
Thanks for listening. Our conversation with Rachel continued beyond what you heard in this episode, so keep an eye out for a bonus episode on Tuesday with even more conversation that we couldn't fit into this episode. If this conversation resonated with you or rattled some of your cages, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to get in touch on socials, or you can send us an email at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. Once again, the number to contact Lifeline is 13 11 14, and there are other mental health resources down below in the show notes if you found this conversation troubling. If you want to support us, then that really would mean the world to us, and for those of you who are already along for the ride with us, we salute you. We'll be back early next week with a bonus episode with even more discussion with Rachel, and then back again next Friday as we dive into the Easter narrative with a discussion about Palm Sunday. Until then, always remember, stay filthy, take Jesus seriously, and don't be a dick.